In a tense Senate hearing, Senator Michael Bennet confronted Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent over the administration's fiscal policies, accusing the Treasury of prioritizing massive tax cuts for wealthy Americans while increasing the national debt and reducing funding for essential social programs. Bennet questioned how the administration could claim to be committed to fiscal responsibility while advancing legislation that, in his view, would significantly worsen the nation's financial outlook.
Is only 15% of our budget. And I think if you were serious about deficit reduction, you might not push for tax cuts that almost certainly could not be offset by discretionary adjustments alone. And now, of course, we know you can't. Today, we actually have the details of your plan. Take health care from 10 million Americans, 126,000 Coloradans. Cut nutrition assistance for millions of adults. Sunset clean energy investments that are so critical to the American West. Give over 40% of the tax benefits of this bill to the top 5%. And it's not even close to being paid for. Even my colleagues on the Republican side, who for years and years and years have claimed to be the fiscally responsible party, now are admitting that it's not paid for. This bill adds another $2.4 trillion to our national debt. It will push the deficit to GDP ratio up to 7%, which you said when you were here before was unsustainable, far from the 3% target that you described. If you look at your proposals taken together, there is no getting around the fact. There is no getting around the fact that the richest Americans receive an average tax cut of $300,000, which, again, we're not paying for with the discretionary cuts that you advertise. So once again, we will have to borrow money in order to assist the people in this country who least need a tax cut at this moment, while the Americans who have been made miserable by the economy that they're in actually see income reduced because of cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP. Meanwhile, and I think, Mr. Chairman, this is really important, meanwhile, interest rates are at 20-year highs. Moody's has slashed our credit rating because of the fiscal irresponsibility of this administration. The World Bank has cut our growth estimates in half, and the bond markets are screaming at us to stop. We now pay, and we are paying this year, more in interest than we are in the national defense. Secretary Bessent, how can you square your concern with fiscal health with deficit finance growth for families that need those tax cuts least?
Senator, I'll begin with that we did not get here. We inherited this fiscal situation that I believe.
Well, you inherited from Donald Trump, who was here. You did, Mr. Bessent.
No,
yes,
sir.
You did, Mr. Bessent. You inherited from Donald Trump. He's the first president to come back after a 4-year hiatus, after we know exactly what the last tax cuts did, which was blow a massive hole in our deficit and debt. You can't sit here and lie about that. It's true. The data, to coin a phrase, the data shows that that's the result. The math shows that that is the result. No one on this side of the aisle admits anymore that or claims anymore that they didn't blow a huge hole in the deficit. They did. And now you're here saying to the American people, let's double down on that. We're going to give tax cuts for the wealthy. We are going to give tax cuts again to the wealthiest people in America, and we are going to finance it on the backs of the sons and daughters of teachers and firefighters and police officers all over this country, because we can't pay for it. Because the Treasury Secretary discovered somehow that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of the budget, and therefore you can't balance it there.
Well, sir, we had a referendum on November 5th.
You certainly did. I agree with
policies. Your side lost.
I agree with that.
And a higher decibel
And
level.
I'm a rare Democrat who doesn't blame Donald Trump for winning. I'm sad he won. I don't blame him for winning. But don't come here.
In your statements,
go ahead.
They have veracity.
Go ahead, Mr. Secretary. What?
Higher decibel level does not give your statements more veracity.
My statements are true, if that's the word, if that's what you mean by veracity. My statements are true. You blew a massive hole in the deficit when your predecessor was sitting here under Donald Trump. And so the question is, can't we think of something better to do with the money than this debt, than drive up interest rates by borrowing money from our kids so the richest people in America can get a tax cut when they don't need it? That is the reality of your plan.
Well, sir, actually the high interest rates were achieved during the Biden administration in October of 2023, and we have not touched those rates since then. So
the higher interest rates.
No, your statement's incorrect.
I'm out of time, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Bennet began by reminding Secretary Bessent of their previous exchange regarding domestic discretionary spending. He noted that discretionary spending accounts for only about 15% of the federal budget, arguing that meaningful deficit reduction cannot be achieved through spending cuts alone. He then pointed to the administration's latest tax proposal, arguing that it would reduce health care coverage for approximately 10 million Americans, including more than 126,000 Colorado residents. Bennet also criticized planned reductions to nutrition assistance programs and the rollback of clean energy investments that he described as vital for states across the American West. According to Bennet, the proposal overwhelmingly benefits higher-income households, with more than 40% of the tax savings going to the wealthiest 5% of Americans. He argued that the legislation is not fully financed and would add an estimated $2.4 trillion to the national debt, pushing the deficit to GDP ratio to roughly 7%, far above the 3% target Secretary Bessent had previously described as sustainable. The senator further argued that the average tax cut for the wealthiest Americans would reach approximately $300,000, while middle and lower income families could experience reduced support because of cuts to Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. He maintained that the government would effectively borrow additional money to provide tax relief to those who need it least. Bennet also cited broader economic concerns, pointing to elevated interest rates, Moody's downgrade of the U.S. credit rating, reduced growth projections from the World Bank, and continued pressure from bond markets. He warned that the United States is now spending more on interest payments for its debt than on national defense, describing it as a troubling sign of the country's fiscal trajectory.
Closing his remarks, Senator Bennet challenged Secretary Bessent to reconcile the administration's stated commitment to fiscal discipline with policies that, according to Bennet, expand deficits while primarily benefiting the nation's highest earners. He pressed the Treasury Secretary to explain how such an approach could be justified as fiscally responsible when the country's debt, borrowing costs, and long-term financial obligations continue to grow.